We've lost a decade of kids to online harm because of lack of action.
We've seen an explosion in child exploitation with kids being groomed. 1 in 8, for example, on Instagram, this came from Meta's own study, experienced some kind of unwanted sexual contact within the most recent week of them.
1 in 8?
Wow. 1 in 8. The majority of our kids, the average age being 12, are seeing porn, seeing sexual content. Not largely non-consensual, but a significant chunk, 35% non-consensual, nearly half being incestual, family kind of content, and the majority being violent or aggressive, name-calling, etc.
New Zealand doesn't have a strategic national approach to online safety. We don't have an action plan. We don't have a commissioner leading the charge. We don't have a regulator that's holding platforms accountable. We don't have an online safety law.
No one is going to do anything about that content being available online.
It's not Minister of Children.
No.
It's not Minister of Women. It's not Minister of DAA.
It's shocking. It is shocking.
It is shocking.
Kia ora and welcome to One Young Mind podcast. It's a fact that our young people live in an increasingly addictive digital world, and whilst that world can bring a lot of positives, what exactly are the risks? I'm Matilda Green, content creator, presenter and mother of 3.
And I'm Dr. Manish Deva, paediatrician. This podcast discusses mental health issues, self-harm and suicide, so please listen with care. If you or someone you love is struggling, please reach out to a professional for help. Helpline numbers can be found in the show notes of this podcast.
Welcome, Jo and Holly. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
I'm so excited.
We're very excited to have you both. Jo, should we kick off with you? What are you seeing in your work with young people and families when it comes to exposure to pornography and harmful online content? Because some of the stats I have seen are shocking.
Yeah, absolutely. So we think about online harm in 4 different categories. So we've got content, which is what you're talking about. So that's the porn, or it might be seeing gore, it might be seeing realistic horror, like the Christchurch shooting, for example, or Charlie Kirk's recent assassination. So that's content. And then we've got contact, so people who are reaching out to young people or children online. Then we've got conduct, so how do people behave online? That might be how the child or young person behaves as well, not just somebody contacting them. And then the 4th C is contract or commerce. So what are the terms and conditions they sign up for without really awareness of what they're signing up for? How is their data being used? How are they being sold things? What's the algorithm doing, etc.? So what we're seeing is a lot of harm in all of those categories. You know, young people have no idea how they're being taken advantage of online, both in that contract commerce space, but also by adults. You know, for a long time, the rhetoric has been, what don't we want kids accessing, or kids accessing social media, for example. But I think about it as social media accessing our kids, or adults accessing our kids. So not just what they are coming across, but who's coming across them. So we've seen an explosion in child exploitation with kids being groomed. 1 in 8, for example, on Instagram, this came from Meta's own study, experienced some kind of unwanted sexual contact within the most recent week of them.
1 in 8?
Wow.
1 in 8 of them being asked in that survey. So there's a lot of kids, 1 in 3 under 18, have an online sexual interaction of some kind, and that's under 18-year-olds. So there's a lot of contact happening, grooming and exploitation, but they're also seeing a lot. So the majority of our kids, the average age being 12, are seeing porn, seeing sexual content, really explicit, not how maybe some of us used to see content. Not largely non-consensual, but a significant chunk, 35% non-consensual, nearly half being incestual, family kind of content, and the majority being violent or aggressive, name-calling, etc. So that's a long-winded answer to what's it like to be a kid now online.
So if the average age is 12, how many are younger than 12? Or what's the sort of lower age limit you see?
So about 50%, right, if that's the average. And anywhere down to the moment a child is accessing either a search engine or being on a user-generated site, so where the consumers, us, create content and can upload, there will be porn on that site. So whether it's Roblox or whether it's Minecraft, if they're in chat functions, whether it's social media, etc., then there'll be sexual content there.
Yeah.
It's quite shocking. We've talked about it in this podcast before, that the pornography that these kids are seeing is not your dad's centerfold from the 90s, right? And I look at my own Instagram, and you can see in the hidden requests folder, you know, where they try and filter out a lot of that kind of spam pornographic content. But it's just, you just click hidden requests, and it's right there. And it's all stepsister, stepbrother, stepfather, all, it's bizarre. It's really horrible that these kids, that's their first kind of introduction to something sexual is that.
Yeah, I mean, there wouldn't be a day that goes by for me, and it might be the same for you. There wouldn't be a single day that goes by where I don't get a sexual message. And that message will be enticing me onto another platform to look at content or onto a certain profile, which is highly sexualized, really demeaning to women usually. So, you know, that's every single day. But I'm an adult, so I can, you know, either block those people, report them, or I can just ignore it and see it for what it is, which is marketing. But if I'm 12, if I'm 11, 14, 15, whatever, and I'm in a highly impressionable developmentally, you know, I'm curious as well about sex and relationships. That's really impactful. I'm more likely to click if I'm 13 than I am now as an adult.
And this is kind of a question for both of you, but how do you think this affects a child's sense of self or their ability to interact with the world?
I think that it really normalises unhealthy sexual behaviour and expectations around sex and what is to be expected. It also can cause real trauma. I've had so many stories come in from parents who have found out their child has seen something really disturbing. For example, there was a couple of 11-year-old boys that were sharing child sex abuse material on WhatsApp, and the mum, who I know, reached out and said, "Where can I go for help?" So traumatic to see that type of content. And yeah, it just really worries me that there are so many kids seeing content that aren't talking to their parents about it and are navigating that on their own, and what the long-term impacts will be.
I mean, to outline the impacts, so we've got them in 5 different categories, just really high levels. So the only way that I remember this is by the acronym GRAMS.
Grams.
So gender, so we know that it's impacting them in terms of their ideas about how to perform their gender and what to expect of others. More stereotypical, more traditional, thinking that men should be powerful, women are weaker, that they should submit, etc. Risky sex, so young people who consume a lot of sexual content are less likely to use a condom, more likely to do things that might harm. And then aggression, so 4 to 8 times more likely to actually perpetrate sexual harm. Mental health, more likely to isolate themselves. They can develop a preoccupation, which means that they look at it more often. They're thinking about what they saw from last night instead of doing maths in the school day. And then sexual health, so changing the way that they view sex, view their own bodies, view other people's bodies, how they should be in a sexual encounter. So those are the 5 categories that we know over about 20 years worth of research, it's shaping them.
And just with that grooming question, we're talking about the really severe end. I was wondering, I don't know if I've been solicited or had an inappropriate contact, because you sort of block it away. How does it start for a kid? Or would a parent be able to identify this is probably inappropriate? Presumably there's some breadcrumbs, but it'd be pretty hard for a kid to know what it looks like.
Yeah, it often starts with just a casual encounter. Hey, saw your profile, you look cool, or I saw you like football, or, something really basic. And then an average kind of grooming experience is actually about 45 minutes. So from the time of first encounter to the to the request of an image or video, or to the request of a further relationship, being let's video chat online, or whatever it is that's going deeper than just a casual chat, about 45 minutes. And, a story that I was just heard recently was that a boy who started this online encounter with who they thought was a girl, they were 15, thought it was somebody who was just romantically interested in them. That's flattering. I would have responded to that if I was 15. I'd be like, stop, someone thinks I'm pretty. And then he was asked to send a nude, of which he did. He obliged. And then within 6 hours, he'd actually taken his own life. Because
Jordan to me.
Yeah, because he was exploited and told that, he needed to continue to offer more or else it was going to be shared online. But there is story after story after story of that, just only some make it to the media. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, also that takes the parents making the decision to go to the media as well, because I think there's a lot of shame around it, that parents feel guilt as if it's their fault, as if they think, how could, one, my child not have known what to do, and two, why couldn't I have intervened? But can you talk a little bit about how it could be anyone's child that it's not the parent's fault when something like this happens?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, using Jordan as an example, actually, he was really prolific in sport, very popular. Friends loved him. You know, he was just kind of regular and normal, probably a little bit moody as well. Like, you know, it doesn't have to be a perfect child. Teenagers are confusing beasts. But yeah, it could be anyone's. I do parent workshops, as does Holly, and there wouldn't be a workshop that goes by without a parent who's coming up and saying, you know, this type of thing happened to my kid. A parent recently said to me that her child, 14, was filmed by friends on a surfing trip. Like, they went off, did something, you know, normal and fun, and a group of friends, and then he was filmed in the shower. And so, you know, that's damaging in and of itself, knowing your friends have betrayed you in that way. But then they threatened to share that, and then they did share it amongst a small group of people. And, you know, so damaging for him. And that's just regular families, regular kids. This cuts across demographics. We do know that lower income households, they have more screen time, and that's probably because there's less money to be spent on extracurricular activities, which I know are deeply, deeply expensive, and, you know, so we got a lot of inequity there. So we have some vulnerable groups, but it's every ethnicity, you know, it's each gender, yeah.
It's also, I guess, when parents are really stressed, and if there is financial stress in the household, that is a huge contributing factor. So then you're probably more likely to rely on screens and phones if that sort of financial stress is so prevalent in your life. It can be really hard to then be totally engaged in parenting, right? When you've got a lot on your mind, you're trying to feed your kids, work hard. So it is tricky. But what about New Zealand compared to the rest of the world? Like, how prevalent is this sort of thing in New Zealand compared to kind of globally in terms of online harm?
Well, key question, do we collect enough data? No. So the first level of prioritising this as an issue would be to actually ask young people regularly what their experiences are and, you know, how their online life is going, and we don't do that. I think that there's a lack of funding in this space, and there has been for a long, long time, so we don't collect the data. But I do wonder, this is just a wondering, not a, you know, certainty, if there's, you know, the powers that be, the change makers, they know that once they start asking those questions, that the answers they get are going to demand some action, and that's going to take more funding and more investment and more time. And I think there's some reticence or reluctance there to do that. And so you don't ask questions if you're not really wanting to know the answers. So we don't have a lot of data in New Zealand. However, what we know is that when we have asked questions, for example, exposure to sexual content, or we've got reports now of grooming on Snapchat, just on that platform though, that we are the equivalent of other countries, if not a few years just behind. So, you know, the data package, the device, and the platforms that a 13-year-old uses in New Zealand is exactly the same as if they were in Texas or if they were in Sydney, right? They're all on the same platforms using the same, you know, free data that their parents are paying for. Definitely not free. But they're doing the same things, and so they experience the same harms. Yeah, so we can use international data and kind of like say, yeah, this is happening here too.
What do parents and schools tell you that they're struggling with the most?
I mean, a school recently just told me that screen time, so kids coming to school tired, distracted, struggling with emotional regulation because for many years they've used devices as emotional regulation. So that's an impact that's not about content, it's not about conduct, it's just about their amount, literally, of exposure to the device itself and how it's been used for their mental well-being. So that's piece one. And then piece two, the stuff that they are seeing, and then bringing that into the classroom. And I don't mean showing, you know, a kid when they're learning maths, but talking about it and that being distressing or distracting for the child that's now hearing about it. Groups at school developing like WhatsApp groups and then sharing content amongst each other, that being, you know, distressing and distracting. And then we've got kind of person-to-person harms. So bullying, image-based abuse, which is where I might take a photo of you, maybe I'll nudify it. That's a that's a concept for people who don't understand, where you take an image, put it on a platform online, take the person's clothes off, so it's now an AI-generated image, and then sharing it amongst the school. So you've got
And it's really realistic looking, right?
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
looks 100% real.
Yeah. So we've got various things happening at levels of severity. Obviously, image-based abuse is extremely damaging, and the trauma that comes from that is significant. People, tend to develop depression, anxiety. They can start self-harming, or they can take their own life. So that would be some of the most consistent themes I get, at least from schools. And I know Holly is the same with her work in schools. That's what we're hearing the most.
Yeah, we've had schools reaching out saying that they're seeing really addictive behaviours in the young people, that they're coming to their school counsellors to say, I'm really struggling with addiction, so just can't keep off the screen, not sleeping because they just can't turn off the phone. And that's really impacting their entire world, their entire being,
Their well-being,
their learning. I recall a principal telling me that she was doing some work with some year 1 kids, they were 5 years old, about emotional regulation, and that she was really just confronted by asking the kids, what do you do when you have big feelings and you feel really upset? And this little boy, 5 years old, said, I get my iPhone and I lie in my bed and I watch things on YouTube. Yeah, I just thought that was so sad, because to use that distraction as emotional regulation is obviously very formative. Like you're forming a pattern there that's going to take you into your future life, and that's not ideally what we want. We want our kids to be able to learn to sit with hard emotions and to feel them and to be able to navigate themselves through that, and hopefully with a parent's support rather than being distracted with a phone.
Yeah, because I guess that happens to us adults as well. Sometimes when we're feeling really tired, really dysregulated, being on a phone feels good because it gives you dopamine and you can regulate faster. But we had those formative years without it.
Yeah.
And so I know when I'm doing that, and I am aware that it is the wrong thing to do. And I have the skills and the tools to be able to say, no, I'm actually not going to do it that way at the moment. I'm going to do it the good way,
and I think
the manual way.
Yeah, and it is the manual way. There's a time and a place for, sometimes we do need distraction, but if that's our go-to every time, then that's obviously going to be problematic for our water.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my worry, I guess. If you miss those developmental stages when you're 5 through 12, then when you come back to life in 13 or you're trying to get a job, the offline world can be the unusual thing that can be really difficult to navigate. And that's where I see a lot of young kids, they get into that dependency. It's sort of not just use, it's that dependent use. What do you say to parents who say, oh, they need it though, or I need it, I need to give it to them? Because it's really tough. They're screaming around the house and they really want it. What do you say to them?
I mean, there's truth in what they're saying, because the craving is real.
Yeah.
So they are showing need for it, because that's what addiction looks like, right? It looks desperate. It looks like I can't cope without this. And there's going to be a period of time where it's going to be really hard to transition away from that. Yes.
It's a crunchy time.
Yep. And they're going to experience some low-level withdrawal symptoms. They're going to struggle with their regulation. It's going to be tough. There's going to be more crying. There's going to be some anger. They're going to struggle to sleep maybe for a short period of time because it's not what they're used to. So we've got to work a muscle, and that's the way I always think about it, is that in a season of change, we've got to work a new muscle and be up for the pain sometimes that comes with that, knowing that the long-term gain is we need that. We need them to be able to regulate so that they can go to the workforce, that they can be rejected by a partner and cope, still be okay.
Yeah. I love that model, that you're sort of working on this thing, that this is a skill maybe we didn't think about, but we probably need to think about it now. This is an actual skill.
Yes. Yeah, the opportunity cost is so significant of extended screen time. So no matter what they're on, whether it's what we call high quality content or low quality content, the opportunity cost being that they don't spend time in nature. We know how important nature is for our well-being. It actually builds our immune system, but it also regulates our emotions and brings us better mental health. So the opportunity cost is so significant. We have to prioritise lowering that time online and building up that time in real life.
Let's talk policy for a little bit. Holly, I know this is your area, so can you give us a bit of a rundown on how New Zealand compares to other countries in terms of protecting kids online? Like what laws currently exist to protect kids?
Yeah, so it's really helpful to benchmark ourselves against other comparable countries to see kind of where we're sitting globally and what's actually working elsewhere. In policymaking, we call that lesson drawing. So we'll kind of draw lessons from other comparable countries that are addressing a similar social issue, and adapt what works for them to suit our environment. So it's better than starting from scratch, and it's about taking the good from a comparable country's approach and kind of importing that into our own environment. So New Zealand doesn't have a strategic national approach to online safety. We don't have an action plan. We don't have a commissioner leading the charge. We don't have a regulator that's holding platforms accountable. We don't have an online safety law. We have a couple of different specific laws that are quite dated that fill a couple of different gaps. When we benchmark ourselves against other comparable countries, so countries like the UK, Australia, Ireland, Canada, we can also look to the EU. They all have robust online safety legislation in place. They have a regulator. Some of them have a commissioner as well. And they have like a strategic national approach. So regardless of who's in government, these online safety laws are going to be enacted and the strategy is going to carry on. So we don't usually draw lessons from the USA for a number of different policies, but when it comes to the online space, children in the USA are using the internet pretty similarly to how they're using it here. They do have a different kind of legislative, judicial environment, so each state makes their own laws and has their own kind of court processes. But what we're seeing is a real influx at the moment of different states in the USA starting to put things in place like age verification, parental consent, and limits on social media for minors and, age verification around pornography, for example. So we're starting to see real action around, what can we do to keep children safe? And it's kind of state-specific. These countries are all gathering data or intel on what actually is reducing harm and how effective these policies are. So, and they're also backed up with real enforcement. So in the UK, Ofcom can issue fines to big tech of up to 10% of the company's global annual turnover. And Australia can implement fines of up to 49.5 million Australian dollars for failure to meet obligations. So we've kind of got a real duty of care focus, safety by design focus, and a real focus on what are you doing to prevent harm to children.
And so those fines would be to the platforms?
To the platforms,
right.
Yeah. So, the focus is generally on platforms operating responsible business models that put child safety at the core. So, I think when we think about lesson drawing, we can look at what other countries are doing and we can draw lessons from the successes that we see to design what we would hope, that we can design and implement policy in New Zealand that really suits our unique culture and context in Aotearoa, grounded in te tiriti, proportionate to the size of our country and to what our tamariki, our rangatahi, our kids, what they need. So we're really hopeful that will happen.
Mm. And so you've touched on a few things there. Who has done this kind of well, or New Zealand should look at and say, hey, that was really good, that worked?
Australia and the UK and the EU have got some really good, robust online safety legislation in place that they've been working on for many, many years, and this year has been the first year that they've really significantly rolled things out. So, online safety laws that are focused on, like I said before, safety by design, secure by design. So we want our privacy to be kept safe. Looking at kind of ways that we can prevent children from accessing illegal content, but also well-defined harmful content. Industry have been involved in the development of some of these codes of practice, codes of expectation, I should say. The EU has the Digital Services Act, and it's quite interesting because it's quite different from the UK and the Australian approach.
The safety by design thing is interesting because we're kind of scrambling to figure out how to make them safe for children, because we all of a sudden have this influx of children on them, which maybe Mark Zuckerberg and co weren't expecting when they started it. So it feels a little bit whack-a-mole-y. I want to know about who is in charge of online safety and like which kind of government departments are in charge, because it can be kind of confusing. Like there's DIA, there's NetSafe, Oranga Tamariki, Ministry of Education,
Police,
ACC. There's a lot of groups, but
in New Zealand, we do have a patchwork approach to how we address online safety. We don't have a clear, specific online safety law. We don't have one department that's responsible for online safety. We have a number of, we have two kind of older laws that we rely on for some aspects of online harm, which I'll speak to in a minute, and then a couple of other laws that kind of touch on online harm, and then 10 kind of agencies that are involved in different aspects of different laws. So it's very complicated. I would call it like a net full of holes, and we're patching up the holes with different things as we go, as new trends emerge or new risks emerge. The main legislation that we rely on is the Harmful Digital Communications Act of 2015. It focuses on individual cases of harm such as bullying, harassment or image-based abuse. It doesn't cover synthetic image-based abuse, so using nudify apps to create sexual images. So it kind of allows people to make complaints to NetSafe around harm that they are experiencing as individuals online, and NetSafe can navigate the process of remediation or takedowns with platforms and maybe take it to the courts if it needs to go that far. The HDCA focuses on harm after it occurs, so there's no preventative action happening. The second legislation we have is the Films, Videos, Publications, Classifications Act of 1993. So that was written before the internet existed. The internet was developed for adults, and it hasn't been developed with children in mind. So that's like fundamentally a problem there, that kids are using the internet and it just wasn't designed for them. So we're relying on this piece of legislation that was focused on classifying content that was primarily print content, so like books or magazines or videos, DVDs. And it deals with illegal content, so quite extreme, objectionable content like terrorist content or child sex abuse material. It wasn't designed to manage the amount of content that is being published online. It's just that content has exploded and the law can't keep up with that. It's got no kind of mandate to do anything about that. So if someone sees something objectionable like child sex abuse material, they can report it to the DAA or the chief censor, and they can investigate it. They can deem whether it's objectionable or not, and then they can issue a takedown notice. So kind of individual pieces of content is the focus. The laws don't have any kind of mandate to hold accountability to platforms for their role in distributing illegal content. For example, nudify apps. There's no legislation that holds a platform accountable for enabling the creation of deepfakes. So we also have a splattering of other laws like the Crimes Act, the Privacy Act, the Defamation Act. Little elements of those play into some aspects of online harm. So there's many different agencies and departments that are responsible for different parts of these. So we've got Customs, New Zealand Police, DAA, Classifications Office, Ministry of Justice. Who else we've got?
Yeah, everyone, every
That's
single
a lot.
agency.
I feel like we're naming them all.
Mostly every
Ministry of Education,
social development.
They fund filtered internet into schools through Network for Learning, but they're not all collaborating together strategically. It's all very ad hoc and very it's patchwork. It's very fragmented. So, what we would love to see is leadership. We'd love to see an online commissioner that can actually oversee all of this, because currently the system isn't working and we have very much out of date. We just can't keep relying on this kind of fragmented patchwork approach where we've got this net full of holes and we're just patching them up or just waiting.
What do you think the biggest missed opportunities from the government have been so far?
Oh, don't get us started there, Matilda. So the previous government proposed, or they developed this consultation, Safer Online Services and Media Platforms. So they did, over a period of about 3 years, they consulted with multiple groups, us included, around what should happen in the media space. So combining kind of TV, streaming services like Netflix, Neon, etc., and also internet service providers under one system. And it would be independent of government. So it would be about developing an independent regulator, which is what we've advocated for years. So they would propose the system. It was still in its relative infancy in that specific codes of practice that providers had to abide by hadn't been developed yet. But then we had a government come in and decide to scrap that.
Why did they decide to scrap it?
So under the premise of free speech, that there were too many complaints about free speech, that it would impede on people's free speech online.
So during the consultation process over that 3-year period, the submissions that came in, 50% of them were supportive of regulation of the online space. 40% were neutral and 10% were against, and they were primarily because there was a risk to free speech. So this is all held under the Department of Internal Affairs, of which we have an ACT minister who's in leadership. So that was really incredibly disappointing to see 3 years of work in a kind of draft. It was a draft process. There was lots of research. There was lots of policy comparisons or lesson drawing from other countries. There was some really good stuff happening. It wasn't in its final stage. It was just that, in process, and to see that get scrapped was, really gutting for us. But also, that's on the back of other previous governments also initiating different things. Like before that, it was Tracy Martin with her she was trying to get age verification for pornography websites. So we've kind of had consecutive governments over time, looks like acknowledging that there's issues in the online space and issues around regulation and starting the process to put things in place. The next government would come in and scrap the entire lot of work that's been done and start again. So that's why it's so essential that we have a commissioner leading the charge, because we can't play politics when it comes to online safety. Just even looking in the last 10 years of 3, different government processes, it's like distressing to see how much insight they have with cabinet reports, with expert insight, with recommendations, with academics saying like this is happening, we need to address these things, but it's not being addressed. And our kids are the ones that are suffering. So these last 10 years, they've just been totally neglected. And I think parents haven't fully understood what's happening. I think there's been real high trust in government is going to sort this out. Surely the worst of the worst is being dealt with. Surely platforms aren't able to do really, unethical things and have unethical practices. There's been high trust, and it's really
unfounded.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's unfounded. There is nothing.
Yeah.
There is nothing. And Holly's, perfectly outlined that with these outdated laws and lack of leadership. An example just in our work is when we started Make Sense, we were really, really focused on illegal content, objectionable content. So real rape videos, not simulated. So sites that literally were like rape.com, and saying this is not fake, this is real sexual assault, essentially, on the sites.
Available on the open web.
Yeah.
Google, Bing.
Totally. So not
millions of videos.
Yeah, not like dark web territory. People say this to me all the time, like, oh, what's on the dark web?
It's just the web.
It's just the web. Yeah.
So you wouldn't need to be a tech-savvy 14-year-old.
No, absolutely
you could just be an 8-year-old, 9-year-old who's seen something click through.
You might hear the
heard
word
a term.
rape.
Heard a term.
And you Google, what is rape? And you will see videos. and
I was infuriated by this for many years, kept saying to DIA officials in my previous work, what are we doing about rape videos? And bestiality is another category that's freely available, open web, millions of sites, millions of videos, etc. And what are we doing about that? Is something going to happen? And over again for years they would say, yes, we're going to deal with that, we're going to do that, and never. At all, I don't believe they actually were going to deal with that. So we, at the beginning of Make Sense, we were really, really focused on that. And essentially, through meeting with every single institute, like every single ministry, MSD, ACC, all of them, police, it falls
And
to
big
no
tech.
one. Yeah, and big tech, it falls to no one. They all shift the blame. So they'll all say, oh, no, that's blah, blah, blah minister, or that's that group, or you need to talk to them. And then we'll talk to them. That person will say, oh, no, they said the wrong thing. No, it actually needs to go back to them. No one is going to do anything about that content being available online.
It's not Minister of Children.
No.
It's not Minister of Women. It's not Minister of DAA.
No, it's
It's
No one.
It's shocking.
shocking.
It is shocking.
It is shocking.
How's that been personally for you two? You sort of know what's under the hood now, and it seems like you've lifted up the front door mat, and it doesn't sound very good. How's
How
that been on that
frustrating.
journey? Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I can't even really go there, to be honest, because it's been so long and the harm's so well documented now. So not, oh, there's content and we don't know how it impacts people. It's, oh, there's content, it deeply impacts them. They're seeing it at an incredibly young age and we act just like we don't care.
Ignore
That is kind of the response that I feel. And so for many years, the way that I've seen this is that this is an adults versus children fight, and adults win every time. Basically, when there's a decision around should we protect adults or should we protect children, we go with the adults every single time.
That was quite revealing. 10% were against it, but there was a lot of neutrals and a lot of for it.
Even
but
for
it was
big
that
tech.
10%, I guess, who represent that adult viewpoint of free speech.
And they're very loud. And in terms of, they petition the public really passionately. And we're huge advocates for taking everyone on the journey. So we have met with all of those organisations as well who are strong advocates for free speech. And everybody in a democracy, like everyone's opinion is valid. We need to hear them out and we need to go on that journey with them. People can't feel like they're being left behind in change. So let's work together. And that was some of the feedback, was that in that Safer Online Services Media Platforms consultation, certain groups were ignored and therefore they feel annoyed.
And they don't go away.
They don't go away and they lose trust. They lose further trust in the government. That SOSMP consultation sat on the back of COVID. So there's a wider socio-cultural, socio-political kind of context that it sat on top of, where already there was a lack of trust in government. And
fear of control.
fear of control, absolutely. And so many people will look at that and be like, oh, well, we should just ignore those people. And no, we don't think we should ignore those people, but we should hear them out and we should go on the journey together. Everyone should feel like they're being consulted with and that we've got a solution that works, whilst there will be compromise for every party or every group who has a different opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
So what about these big tech platforms? You mentioned that you had met with all of these different departments and these platforms. What do they think of the proposed changes coming?
Oh, I mean, I don't think they love change. They probably don't love accountability, but at least what they've expressed to us is that they do want clarity. So they want to know what's required of them. Snap as an example. I don't have a lot of faith in social media companies, but Snap, just as one example, they said to us, we want to know in clear detail what it is that parents or government struggles with and how can we adapt the platform to ensure that we remove those pieces, for example. So they don't want piecemeal. They want it to be really clearly defined. What do we want changed, and how can they do that so that they can keep kids on there? So that's their primary motivation, but that it's safer. I'm not convinced there is a way to keep kids on social media in a safe way. So I don't think that's possible. However, that's what they've said they want, is just tell us exactly what you want and we will try and do that.
Yeah, I think that we generally find that they support the intent of keeping children safe online, that, everyone we've talked to, they genuinely think that they are doing good things to keep kids safe online, but they would support kind of more voluntary self-regulation models, or the government, defining this is how it's going to be. But, I think that there's a real confidence in the way that they're already approaching it with their parental controls and their teen accounts, and the way that they kind of would explain it to us is that they've got some great things in place and they're really doing some good things. And we would disagree.
We would strongly disagree.
I would disagree. As a parent, I do find that confusing because there'll be something in the media. Oh, Facebook's completely changed. It's totally safe now. And it seems a bit pessimistic here. Those strategically come out at various points to confuse us as parents.
Yeah.
That we think, oh, they've changed something.
It sounds pretty good.
But then someone like yourselves will go on there and say, no. The infinite scroll, the algorithmic content, that is social media as we know it.
Yeah. An example of that is that Holly and I spend time on the platforms ourselves and want to understand them. I signed up as a 13-year-old. Holly signed up as a 14-year-old. Snap supposedly has teen accounts where if they know you're a teen, then they act more, safely. And the second thing that it asked me to do at least was to put my location on a public Snap map. It knows that I'm 13. I've put my birth date in there and it's still requesting I do that. Yeah. I mean, in what world is that safe? I'm not sure. And so I can't help but feel, that their self-proclaiming safe teen accounts are misguided at best.
So there is a lot of talk, but possibly not a lot of action. But it's also that location map. First of all, it's dangerous for predators. But second of all, any parent would know that as a 14-year-old, seeing where all of your friends are on a Snap map and you not being invited or being able to see where everyone is and feeling left out, that's really damaging. Like it's easy for an adult to think, that's all right, you just get over it. But that's a big deal for a child, and these platforms would know that. I don't know why they would put in that feature. It's just...
I think as well, platforms, they don't want to see different regulations in 20 different countries. They would like to see consistency.
Right.
So that's where that kind of international collaboration is really important for us as New Zealanders because we're a small country. There's other countries like the UK, Australia, Canada has legislation in progress. We really need to align ourselves with comparable countries so that we are kind of streamlining the approach. So we want to streamline the approach in New Zealand and have kind of clarity and direction. But if we can do that internationally as well, that's going to be way more effective than, this continual ad hoc.
Well, we're such a small country as well. It makes sense for us to be one big pressure force for some of these platforms.
Does this year seem a bit different in this whole landscape you've been, journeying through? It seems like you mentioned a lot of other countries are sort of taking the lead and we may be looking to piggyback. Does this year seem different or is this like you've seen this before or what's your sense?
It's definitely different. I think we've had a couple of years with these online safety laws being in development and this year was the year that the UK and Australia really started to roll out significant expectations on platforms, and so that's why we're hearing a lot more about it in the media, and that's really positive. And I think as well, parents, because of campaigns like Before 16, parents are more aware of what's happening, what the harms are, what the risks are for our young people, and starting to ask more questions. We had to remember we've come off the back of COVID and we were all online and we were working online, our kids were schooling online, and that was helpful. Maybe some unhelpful behaviours or habits got put into place. And, you touched on before just that feeling of shame, like parents not wanting to talk about the harms that their kids might be facing online or, that their kids sent a nude or whatever. That kind of like when we have that shame, we're just like, we're keeping everything under the carpet. And the more we talk publicly, which I think we're doing more this year, about what's really happening, the more we normalise these conversations and we help parents and children to feel like, oh, you're not the only one that's going through this. There's actually like so many people going through this. So I'm really excited about the fact that we're getting more public discourse around online harm because we don't want these harms to be kind of hidden and to be, not talked about. And
I think there are a lot of parents out there, no judgment, we've all done it, but, that having a child on a device gives you time and it gives you a bit of peace. And I think it's just important to be able to own that and recognise it and speak about that openly because then we can all get through that together
Yeah.
rather than think, I'm a perfect parent because I don't do it and, I'm better than you. Because we all, in some way, we all kind of take a little bit of peace from when a child is on a device. But that's all right. It's judgment free, and we know better. We do better, right?
I don't think any of us are living off grid, right?
No.
No. But before we finish, I want to know if our listeners take one action after listening to this kōrero, what do you think it should be?
I mean, the one action that will make the most radical difference in your own home is how you manage devices. So that's primary intervention, is what do you do at home and with friends, like the conversations you have and the way you change the culture of your school community, for example. So primary intervention is really, really important because this policy structural piece is slow. It's long. And I know that from experience. And so I want people to intervene quickly as we wait for this journey to go through.
What's your message to policymakers, Holly?
We've lost a decade of kids to online harm because of lack of action. And my deepest desire is that policymakers don't use online safety for voting power. I would really like to see, ministers and MPs. We have a coalition government that that don't talk to each other about their own kind of strategic approach around online safety. And I think that lack of collaboration and that lack of really talking to each other is incredibly harmful to our children. And we can't carry that on. We have to have a strategic approach that outlasts different political parties that are in power. My hope would be that, because every government comes in and, scraps different bits of work and starts some new initiative, my message would be talk together, work together, be strategic and focus on the children because they're our future.
Nice.
I couldn't agree more. And we will have you both back for an episode on the education piece, which I know it's a doozy. But for now, thank you both so much for your time. We've really appreciated it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to One Young Mind. We're on a mission to understand what our tamariki are experiencing online, to listen, connect, and make sense of this challenging topic, bringing the conversation to the forefront. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe so you never miss an episode and share it with someone who cares about the well-being of young people.
We'd also like to thank everyone who makes this podcast possible. We simply couldn't do it without you. Executive producers Flicker Williams and Julie Clothier, editor Luke Johnson, Omzi for our branding and design, and the recording team at PodLab, and our commercial partners 2 Degrees and iHeartRadio and the team at Before 16. Thanks for listening. Ka kite anō.